What's going on, everybody? Good morning, happy Thursday, and we are bumping along to the next free agency tier. That's right, we are on tier number 4. I call it low-end starters. You might call them high-end depth pieces, depending on how you want to look at things. But either way, we've cut through the first 3 tiers of free agents, but there are still guys down here that I would really like this team to take a look at. So these are guys who every team has players like this. And every team, unless they are the greatest drafting team of all time, has to fill out some parts of their starting lineup with players like this in order to bring the team together. They just need to find the guys that fit in properly. They just need to find the guys that they can kind of help along with the rest of their roster. And they can easily overcome a comparative lack of talent. Or maybe these are guys you sign for the bench because you really want to make sure you're going to have reasonable options no matter what happens in the 2025 season. So, tier 4, we're going to go through my top 10 free agents I would like the Seahawks to at least consider signing. Going to go down from 10 to 1, and by the end of it, we'll have a pretty good idea of who I'm personally starting to target. So, let's get started with number 10. My number 10 low-end starter I like the Seahawks to take a look at is Chuck Clark, safety, most recently of the New York Jets, but most well known for what he did with the Baltimore Ravens. And the connection that he may have with Mike Macdonald as defensive coordinator and other members of the Ravens staff before then is just one of the reasons why I would like to bring Clark aboard. Coming off a season where he made a triumphant return from a torn ACL, Chuck Clark didn't play stellar in 2024, but he did prove that his NFL career is still viable, and he was also trying to get things done on a team that ended up being one of the worst in the league in 2024. So my idea is you bring Chuck Clark in, knowing that he probably had a little bit of an off season in 2024. PFF bears this out, by the way. He was one of the worst graded safeties in the league by their metrics. And you assume that he's going to make a big step forward a year removed from the major injury. Remember, he's not that old. He's going to turn 30 in April, so should be able to make a full recovery. And given that, I think he would fit in perfectly as a third safety, somebody who plays 25 snaps a game or so, and can step in as a starter in the event of an injury. Spotrac doesn't have a market value page for him. I think it would be somewhere around 1 year, $4 million, because there's an anticipation of a bounce back. And at that price, I'd be pretty happy to bring Chuck Clark on, so he is my number 10. Number 9 for me would be Sebastian Joseph-Day of the Tennessee Titans, although we as Seahawks fans certainly know him better as an LA Ram. Another guy who's just about to turn 30, Sebastian Joseph-Day, has played some nose tackle before, and he might be able to contribute a little bit in that capacity. But I'm also looking at him as a 3-tech to help bring the room together without requiring a big expenditure of resources. He put together a good career with the LA Rams, helped them win a Super Bowl in 2021, went to the Chargers, spent a cup of coffee with the Niners, and then went to the Titans last year. Still been a pretty effective player, somebody who you could get on a multi-year deal and still feel pretty decent about, but the multi-year deal also allows you to push the money back, which makes it superior to a one-year deal in many ways. PFF thinks that he played well last year, despite him having having to participate on one of the worst teams in football, maybe the worst team in football in 2024, and played almost 500 snaps. So if you allow him to play a similar reduced role of about 500 snaps in 2025, I think you're going to get good things out of him. Spotrac says 2 years, $9 million. I'd be okay with that. I think that would be about right. And then you would have nothing to really worry about at the 3-tech position. You've got 3 guys that you can feel good about going into 2025, and you can worry about other stuff going forward. So that's my number 9 pick for this video. My number 8 pick is Foreman, the running back, most recently from the Cleveland Browns, but he's been to many different teams in his career. The Texans, the Titans, the Panthers, where he had his best season, the Bears, and then the Browns. 2022 is the year that really stands out in my mind. I remember Foreman coming into Seattle that year and upsetting the Seahawks by just kind of running all over our defense. So we've seen him play well before. The last 2 years, he's been relatively quiet. He hasn't played a lot. He hasn't gotten the ball a lot. But I still believe this is a potentially pretty good and pretty valuable player. And the thing that stands out here is that he can be a legitimate power back, something that we don't really have. We kind of have it with a guy like Charbonnet, but to me, Foreman is a true power back. PFF was not enamored with his season last year. They're not enamored with anything he's done over the last 2 years when he hasn't played all that much. But I see a good player here who just needs a little bit of a bigger opportunity in a better situation to find it. It would be difficult to fit him on the roster, but if the Seahawks really want to commit to running the ball in 2025, then maybe making sure they have full access to good running backs no matter what happens in 2025 might be part of that. And let's face it, we know that we have guys near the top of this depth chart at running back who are very liable to get hurt. Spotrac says 1 year, 2.7 million. I think it's going to be less. This guy hasn't really done anything for a couple years now, so I think you're talking more about veteran minimum. So if you could spin that for Foreman, I would do that. As long as you can find room for him on the depth chart, he is my number 8 pick for this video. My number 7 pick is Eric Stokes of the Green Bay Packers. This is a great reclamation project for Mike Macdonald. Eric Stokes was originally a first-round pick out of Georgia of the Green Bay Packers. He has not turned 26 yet. He does in a couple of days. So, still young. And I remember really liking Stokes coming out of college. I remember he was one of my favorite guys that had a very, very slim chance of falling to the Seahawks pick that year. Of course, he got nowhere close. But so far in Green Bay, it really hasn't been what we were expecting. Had a nice little rookie year, showed some potential. Since then, he struggled to stay on the field. And last year when he played 17 games, he didn't really do a ton. He wasn't really all that impressive. And now he's probably going to hit the market. So there's a lot to work on here, but I believe there is great talent here. And I think that Mike Macdonald could have a lot of fun trying to figure out how to get it out of him. He wasn't terrible last year, by the way. That's worth noting. He was just okay, about average. And I think that maybe it's something to build on in the right situation. There's no market value page for Stokes, but I'd say something like 2 years, 6 million might be about fair. Give him a little bit of multi-year money. You can push that money out a little bit while also keeping things cheap in case things don't work out, which is very possible. So, not somebody who you would bet on being a big-time contributor in 2025 necessarily, but a great fix-it project. He is my number 7 guy for this video. Number 6 here is Austin Hooper, tight end of the New England Patriots. He's bounced around a lot the last few years as well. He was a really good tight end in Atlanta, borderline elite, but those days are long past. He's bounced around to the Browns, the Titans, the Raiders, the Patriots. So his time at the top has come to an end, but he's still pretty good. He's not super old yet. And while he's not a stellar blocker, he is a better blocker than most of the other options in free agency this year. So if you want a viable tight end, somebody that has had 2 pretty good seasons catching the ball as well out of the last 3 he's played, then Austin Hooper is probably your guy. If the Seahawks decide they want to move on from Noah Fant, and then they decide they want another veteran tight end to maybe give them some insurance for the guy they plan on drafting, I think Austin Hooper is about the best that you can do without breaking the bank. PFF thought he played really well last year, by the way, 75.8. It's not a big volume, but the efficiency is good, and you're not signing Hooper to be a starter now anyway. And Spotrac thinks it's going to be a simple little 1 year, $4.1 million deal. No problem. So you get that done. You've saved about $5 million on where you are with the Noah Fant deal comparatively. and you've got yourself a viable veteran tight end that you know can get it done. So that's my number 6. Number 5 would be a backup linebacker, Elandon Roberts, most recently a Pittsburgh Steeler. He's going to turn 31 in about a month here. So he's getting a little bit on the older side, but I think he still has something pretty good left. I like his background. Spent some time with the Patriots, spent some time with the Dolphins. Brian Flores was kind of the guy that he stuck with throughout the years. He has experience in hybrid defenses, which is something that I really like. He has experience playing in a 3-4 and a 4-3, and a 3-4 that morphs into a 4-3 and back throughout the course of a game, which is going to be handy in a defense that is going to be designed to try to trick the opponent. And he had 2 really good seasons as basically a full-time player in 2022 and 2023. 2024, he played a lot, but he didn't play as much as he had, and his statistics did drop because he took a little bit more of a reserve role and let other linebackers rotate in, but his quality of play was still really good. So, a couple different ways this could work. This could be a budget option if you re-sign Ernest Jones, if you don't re-sign Ernest Jones and want a competent veteran starter, or you sign him as a quality backup to Ernest Jones and Tyrese Knight. Either way, I think it works. Spotrac doesn't have a market value page for him. His last contract was 2 years, $7 million, and he's coming off a year where he played like half the snaps. So I think it might go up to like 2 years, $8 million, maybe a little bit more. Should be around there though. Reasonable depth, and he's my number 5 guy. Really like him. Let's move on. My number 4 player is Chauncey Golston of the Dallas Cowboys. Still relatively young. He just turned 27 about half a month ago, so he's got plenty of good football left in him. And after a quiet first 3 years in the league because he was playing behind so many good players, he got a really good opportunity in 2024. And I don't know if he broke out, but he proved that he was a good player capable of making meaningful contributions in this league. 5.5 sacks, and he has the opportunity to continue to improve going into 2025. Now, I don't know how much he's going to improve by, but I do think that a firm rotation with Nwosu, Mafe, Hall, and Golston is going to get the job done even without one over-the-top killer. PFF was relatively good with his 2024, by the way, a little above average, pretty solid, and it was on over 800 snaps. He would be playing fewer snaps than this in Seattle in all likelihood. Market value for him, 3 years, $22 million. That is quite a bit, but that's how things go for edge rushers right now. And this guy is young enough to where you could really make a dent in your edge room, not only this year, but the following years as well. So Chauncey Golston, a little bit on the pricier side for a low-end starter, but he is my number 3 guy for this video. Obviously, I'm at number 4 just now, not number 3. This is number 3 for me, Elijah Moore. The Seahawks need some help at receiver depth. I know that Kubiak isn't going to use wide receivers a lot, but to me, the Seahawks have a serious need to bolster their wide receiver depth regardless, because after the top 3, soon to be top 2, they don't really have a lot going on. Even if they're only going to use their number 3 receiver for half the snaps or even 40%, they still need a better one. So Elijah Moore would be a guy that I think is good enough to be your number 3 receiver in a Kubiak offense. He hasn't lived up to his draft billing since entering the league, but he's very young still. He's only 25, and he has been pretty good throughout his career. If you look at his career so far, every season he's at least doing something. He's not just a non-factor out there. He's starting games, and he is making a handful of catches a game. He just hasn't been a star yet. I think that would be enough in a place like Seattle, playing with Metcalf, JSN, and whatever tight ends we happen to have. PFF is not particularly impressed with him. They've never been particularly impressed with him, but I think this is the kind of guy who can get it done if we put him in the right situations. And in Seattle, I think he'd be in the right situation. Spotrac says 1 year, $4.5 million. I could see something like that. I could also see a little bit less, but you need the depth. You need a little bit of protection at the number 3 receiver spot. So Elijah Moore is a great pick, and he is my number 3. Number 2 is Levi Onwuzurike, a former Washington Husky, former second-round pick of the Detroit Lions. Hasn't really panned out in the league yet. He's had some bad breaks, but he hasn't even turned 27 yet. Turns 27 in a few days. And I think that in the right situation, he could be reborn in the NFL. He did play a decent amount in 2024. He didn't put up big splashy numbers, but he did get the job done, got a good amount of quarterback pressure, and was generally a capable starter for that Lions defense, especially as the year went on and their defense broke down because of all the injuries. Onwuzurike was one of the guys really trying to help hold things together. Ultimately, didn't work out, but there were so many things that went wrong behind him. It's impossible to blame him. PFF thought he played really well last year, actually, overall. On over 600 snaps, he would have to play far less here, but because he didn't actually break out, he was just a decent player. I don't think he's going to be out there demanding a starting job, and I don't think anybody out there is going to just hand him anything. Spotrac says 2 years, $9.1 million. Little bit steep for a number 3 tech, maybe, because that's what he would be on this team for the most part. But at the same time, I think that these defensive line guys are valuable. Having a rotation is valuable. Protecting yourself from injury is valuable. So I'd be willing to pay a little bit more than some people might for a guy like Onwuzurike, especially because I'm not convinced he even gets this. This is a guy who could slip through the cracks and end up getting like 1 year, $2 million. That happens every year. So either way, I would at least be open to this. Onwuzurike is my number 2 player. And my number 1 low-end starter free agent or tier 4 free agent to consider signing is Josh Palmer of the Los Angeles Chargers. Wide receiver, hasn't even turned 26 yet. Coming off that rookie deal, he's been more or less as advertised after going in the 3rd round. He's never been a star. He's never been amazing, but he's been there when the Chargers need him. He's been productive pretty much the last 3 years at a consistent rate of chipping in, but not being able to be that number 1 and maybe not even that number 2 receiver. Although it should be noted that last year he put up almost 600 yards in Harbaugh's offense, which loved nothing more than to run the ball over and over and over and over again. So 600 yards in that Harbaugh offense means something to me more than it would in almost any other offense. So I think this guy has proven himself, and he could be a number 3 receiver in the Seahawks offense with Kubiak for sure. So if you get Josh Palmer, I think he immediately becomes your number 3, and you can feel good about that spot. PFF was okay with him last year. 67 is a good grade. 63rd out of 98 receivers, not so great. But again, we're not going to be asking this guy to play a ton of snaps. He's going to be asked to play maybe half because he's the number 3 receiver. So I think it works. I think it fits. And Spotrac thinks you could get him on a 3-year, $12.8 million deal. I don't know if it's going to actually pan out that way, but that would be a great deal to get him on. He's still young, still has his best years in front of him. I'd love to give him a 3-year deal for only $12.8 million. There are so many great things about that deal. So if you could get him on something like that, sign me up. Josh Palmer is my number 1 low-end free agent. See you guys later. Go Hawks.